morning, everyone. This is Kathy Mason from MasonWorks Marketing here on Conscious Business Zone with my friend Kimberly Braun. Hi, Kimberly.
Oh, hello.
I'm so excited to be with you, and I always am. Kimberly is a minister, a Reiki Master, an author and poet, which we'll talk about today, a meditation coach, and she's been an incredible teacher at prestigious spiritual places, and she was a nun, so which we definitely got to find out about that, right? So, but the thing she doesn't have on her resume is she's a miraculous cook. I mean, unbelievable chef, and I get to go have dinner with her again. I usually get twice a year. There's some event that I get to eat with Kimberly, and then her birthday. Of course, we did your birthday. But anyway, she's a woman of many talents and very what I love about Kimberly is the love that she shares is palpable to me. I mean, not everyone can share their light and illuminate a room the way you can. So yeah, and I recognize it, and everyone receives it the way they receive it. But wow, you can put it out like a lighthouse, man. So just want to compliment you on that. So today we're talking about how to lead a miraculous life and have miraculous impact, which, yes, how?
I know that's a, it's interesting because that word itself, miraculous, seems to point towards something outside of ourselves. Mm-hmm. And, we relish when something is miraculous that happens. And I love being in the field and in service to help us discover that our very life is meant, and our essential nature is set up for us to live miraculously. And by virtue of saying yes to that, then our impact in the world comes from this place that is innocent and penetrating and life-giving and miraculous. Mm-hmm. So it's a very dramatic postulation, but I think we are meant for nothing less than this.
Oh, beautiful. So can you share with everyone your experience that got you to this knowing? Because you did undergraduate studies in ministry, so you have degrees in it, but then you actually helped build a giant okay, you tell it. I'll mess it up. Right. But I mean, seriously, you don't have fear of a challenge. You have a curiosity and a trust that whatever's delivered to you, you seem to be able to do. And most people out here don't have that. So what's the secret?
Right. So thank you. That's very affirming for you to say. And most of my ministry formation, my grad work, I tested out of my undergrad, which was another miracle. It was freely offered to me. So my grad work and my seminary training actually came post-monastery.
Oh.
But I believe that what has been illuminating for me have come from my experiences of being oriented towards the ineffable and the eternal in all things. Mm-hmm. So not just the ineffable and the eternal as it is beyond us. That is implicit in the immanence. So we have these contrasting ideas when it comes to these ideas of God, of source, of spirit. And some of them we have assumptions around transcendence, and some of them we have assumptions around immanence. And that gets us into these dividing statements around this. In fact, even putting words like matter and spirit seems to say that they are two different things. And I was blessed when I was really little to have experiences of the ineffable in the fiber of my life, in the fiber of creation, and in the elements of me. Now, I said yes to all these things because they made me so happy as a little girl. But it stoked my curiosity to the adventure of what that is. And I think the best word that could be used here is the word embodiment of consciousness.
Mm.
And I wouldn't say that I had a full out, comprehensive, nuanced grasp of that at 5 years old when my experiences started. But I had the seeds for it that set up my orientation so that my questions have always been about that.
Mm.
So my gift there is that that's not unique. That makes me unique as my own individual, but that's not special to me because the experience showed me, and all my experiences have shown me, that the elements that I discover within myself of this potentiality, this raw creative potentiality that's of source, that leads us to have desires, that lead us to manifest and want to pour ourselves out as love in the world or manifest something wonderful, that is the makeup of all of us. That's not just the makeup of a few. And the question isn't whether we are called to that life. The question is more, how are we called to that life?
Mm-hmm.
Paths are very unique. Not everybody's called to join a monastery. And I joined because I was on fire with love for God. And I joined with this wholehearted surrender into the process. And I truly thought, Kathy, that I'd be there for the rest of my life. And that my life would be an exploration of this consciousness throughout creation in silence and chant and meditation. And what the path was it was that and the and came when I had the inspiration, the direct hearing, build the permanent monastery. That was a big pivot point for me, even though I wouldn't have noted it as such, because it started a new form of the same thing for me. I was already living in this cosmic embrace, this cosmic service in the world, this cosmic opening up to love, that I could embody love. I was already in that path, and I still am on that spectrum of growing in that path. But the new form in Build the Permanent Monastery, I had no idea when I said yes to that I was going to be the general contractor.
Okay, so can you tell people how young you were and what your experience was?
29 years old. 29 years old. I had so talk about when we give our yeses in life, we have no idea what's actually going to happen. I think you could probably say the same, right? You get inspired to give this yes, and you're like, holy crap, I didn't know I was saying yes to that.
That's like daily. Like, what was I thinking? But you just know that somehow the energy and the synchronicities and everything you need is going to happen. But in your early 20s, you think you've got it all figured out. And then as you get past 25, 26, 27, it's like, uh-oh. There's lots of things I don't know. And then as you get older, you don't know anything.
You don't know. Right. That's a really wonderful.
But if you could give a little more of that scenario, because it's remarkable what you did.
It is really amazing. And I think what is it's almost like a cosmic joke, is I had just taken solemn vows. So I had just said vows for life to being a Carmelite nun. And I was in the bliss and the ecstasy of that. And I had said yes to joining a small community that was a daughter community to the Mother House in North Dakota. And I said yes to joining them. And they were 4 women who were between 20 and 30 years older than me. So they really needed youth and young zeal and, a bit of a workforce, and they needed the community to grow. And when I said yes to that, I went down there, and about a year into being down there, I was finding that I was really longing for the silence that I had in North Dakota. We did the best we could in Texas to have silence, but our community loved us so much, and we were so small. We were in a converted house that there was a lot of activity, and the house didn't have any rural boundaries. And this isn't to say anything of the people who loved us, because we loved them so much. But we had to mitigate our lifestyle to have a lot less silence and a lot less of protected rhythm or protection for the rhythm. And I found myself butting up against that. And I had largely accepted. But every once in a while, a little resistance would come up in me because I yearned for this solitude and silence. And one day when that yearning became real strong, I went out back and went into the backyard for my meditation. And it had to have been spring because there were yellow wildflowers that were literally as high as my waist. And I waded out into these wildflowers, and I just sunk into silence. And that yearning just exploded within me. That human yearning was actually a divine yearning, because as it exploded, literally, I heard the divine say, build the permanent monastery. And in a mysterious way, that answered my yearning. Right there is a whole life lesson of how divine our desires are if we let go of our ideas around the desires, how they're meant to be fulfilled, what they're meant to look like. If we just are vulnerable and humble and say, this is my raw desire. Well, I gave this big yes to it, but I made an assumption. And when I heard build the permanent monastery, I really thought, okay, it's time. We as a community are going to build our monastery, period. I just thought I was part of the mix. I had no idea that literally step by step by step, and it's outlined in this book, this evolution and this call and this answer, literally, I was called in to the role of building it. We were donated 640 acres of land. And every time I spoke about the project, everybody just was brimming to be a part of it because they were infected by the spirit. My words were so laden with spirit, so pregnant, that people were coming out of the woodwork to be involved with the project. And I found myself with the capacity to know how to talk with engineers, to know how to talk about underground requirements, to know how to read shop drawings, to know how to draw shop drawings. I had been downloaded with the capacity to be a semi-architect, to be a project manager, to be a fundraiser. And they built, of course, upon my human skills that have translated in my life a lot of ways, but they were also very specific to this call. And so I learned that within us are these seeds of potentiality that if we would just give way a little more into the unknown. Now, I like to kind of throw myself into the unknown just because that's my personality. I'm an Aries, and, I just like to go, take me, But even incremental steps can open up horizons of fulfillment by leading a life that's aligned, that we have no idea what's prepared for us. We have no idea what's in store for us. And this project is an example, because I met with a lot of challenges as well on a lot of levels. And I tell them in here not to lay out the challenge for its own sake, but to show that when we're really aligned and in the juice of our flow, when we are in the eternal flow, everything is light. And it was undeniable. I was handling this project with ease, with so much ease and grace, so much ease. It never became heavy. It never became hard. even amidst any challenging, and some of them were very heart crushing for me, it never became hard. That is a testament to being aligned. Doesn't mean that there's not going to be pain or a moment of suffering or challenge or loss, but it means amidst it, we are continuing in this sustainable, effortless, resourcedness place that's right within us.
Wow. So you're in your late 20s and you get the download, build it, they will come kind of thing. Build it and we will have a permanent home. And everything starts to fall into place, that you get the excitement and the joy of doing the jobs that you're called to do. How about the other people around you? What was their role, or how did they just let you be the leader and let you take the reins, or was there any politics to it?
And you mean in my community or outside my community? You know what's so interesting about that, and that's there were moments of confusion for me, but not in a way that confused about my role, more the confusion of wanting it to be acknowledged for the sake of health and support and wholeness. What happened was interesting. We did not sit down as a community and look at the project and say, okay, how do we want to go about this? That would have been the healthy thing to do, right?
Right.
To sit down as a group of women and say, okay, this is coming to us. Sister Annunziata seems to have natural gifts. Should she be the lead? How do we want to do this? Because I wasn't the leader in the community. What happened were influences of old hierarchy and influences of new possibility were operative at the same way, in addition to humanity playing its part. So the leader in the community was so happy to not be in North Dakota and so happy to be in this other community and so happy to be in charge and be able to feel a sense of freedom with her spirituality and her ideas. So in that way, we were a little non-traditional. But alongside that, I discovered, and you'll read in the book, that she actually was still very hierarchical. Because every time I asked for dialogue, and I made assumptions we would dialogue. I mean, I was a new solemn nun, meaning that I had not had any experience of solemn professed life. And I made an assumption that once you're out of boot camp, once you're out of formation, that things are a little more human, that you have more conversations around big decisions. And I was wrong. She said, no, we don't talk about those things. We're not going to have roundtable discussions. We're not going to do this. We don't do, her mantra was, we don't do this in Carmel. So
Wow.
I had the jolt of, as a young nun, navigating that. And that's its own beauty as well, because as young individuals, and I'm not the only one, and especially the generations coming up are so filled with so much light and inquiry and curiosity and so much willingness to step away from structure. Oftentimes we don't support our youth in the insight that they bring, that just because they're youth, they don't have a voice at the table. And that, I think, is a big need for us to change as a humanity.
Mhm.
But that's what I was in. And I was like, wow. So here I am, happen chancing into this role. I assumed she would be the lead on the project, but it was clear right out the gate that I had the capacity and she didn't.
Wow.
Overlay with that, she was suffering from depression. So you have some nuances in the story, if you read it, of the impact of what she was going through that played out in the whole story of it all. So it was almost like I was saying yes to spirit and the heavenly council and all my angels and guys, they're all on board. It's like, yes, let's go team. And then everybody I was working with could see that I was the lead on the project, and there was wholesomeness and friendliness and acknowledgement and mutual support. But in my community, it was almost like it felt a little covert. right, because I'm doing it all, but then she was the spokesperson in the community for it. And some things you could see were undeniable. It was clear when I was on the monastery project every day, it became clear I was running things. But she still put herself as the spokesperson of it, which deprived our community from a level of intimacy that would have let us all feel like we were a valuable part.
Mm-hmm.
So the collective hierarchical tendrils were influencing us. But then there was enough innovation that I was given the freedom. I was given this blank canvas just by virtue of it happening that gave me a lot of latitude.
Ah.
So you've got a mix of a lot of things and then play into that. Some are excited, some are jealous, some are, you get the whole human response to when
Wow.
it's happened.
Wow. So I can understand this. This is really a lesson in leadership in a lot of ways, because the servant leader, like you were taking the role of the servant leader and allowing the community to build the church, and coordinating everything that needed to be done. But then your infrastructure didn't really have a servant leader. It's very fascinating.
Right, right. It didn't, and so that's where you naturally you had this conflict butting up. And I think that unknown to me at the time, like I was really clear because I was so guided by spirit. So there was a lot of clarity. But in that clarity drove me into a lot of moments where I had to really wrestle with my truth. So if I had had the what I wanted, which was just to be an anonymous Carmelite nun, I really just wanted to be in the fiber of humanity. I really wanted to be unknown, unseen, not because of low self-worth, but because I felt that was a real position of freedom. In being deprived of that, for all its mysterious reasons, it forced me. It forced me into these very conundrums. It forced me into having to wrestle with my truth about things. What's okay, what's not okay. And I would say that if my biggest, I would say probably one of my biggest gaps in that moment was that my formation did not leave me with a lot of strength in self-advocacy.
Mm-hmm.
So things now out in the professional world that are natural, understandable professional expectations didn't exist in monastic life. And I hadn't been formed to have that skillfulness. And so while I was navigating all of these things, there were moments when it would have been understandable to expect understanding or respect or support or kindness. And those things weren't given to me. And the
Wow.
only way I could have introduced them if I had would have been for me to be my own advocate. And that was contrary to my formation.
Right.
And so with that, I had to wrestle with that. In the book, there's a passage where I go, wow, if my formation has led me in this moment, instead of being free, I'm actually not free. What is that saying about my formation? What is that saying about my response?
Mm-hmm.
I wrestled with that. Those aren't reasons that I left, because I was working these things out as a Carmelite. I so loved being in vows. I so loved being a Carmelite. I am so the beloved. I mean, my book of poetry, Beloved Found, is just so true for my archetypal path. So I only looked at these things as my growth as a Carmelite. I wouldn't have ever entertained the thought of this is a reason to leave. This is a reason to leave. This is a reason to leave. I start having some doubts of how to navigate things.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't come into the vows piece. It comes into staying in that monastery or not when things get really hard, but it doesn't come into the vows piece. It doesn't come into my calling. And elements of my calling come out in the third book, which is already written and is really very dramatic. You think this story is dramatic, that story is like Hold on.
Wow.
It's really dramatic. Yeah.
Stay tuned, you guys. Really, go to KimberlyBraun.com. Okay, so what we're talking about is that you have tapped into your own divinity, and my personal life mission is to help as many people wake up to their divinity. So I'm so fascinated on now you're in human land, out in the world. And before you were sequestered, and of course, anyone that does spiritual practice in a sequestered place can go deeper, longer, because a lot of your needs are met. But out here, it's real life, creating a business, teaching classes, and how do you see this? The opportunity for others, because I do believe that's part of your gift, is helping others see their own divinity. I really, you're modeling it, but your frequency that you share with others in group is poetry. It's grace. It's really, it's palpable, Kimberly. For me, I'm sensitive. So how do you see that? Because right now we're going through a time period where so many people, either they're waking up or they're starting to examine the rules or the programs. I mean, you to even go into ministry or go into be sequestered, you went out of the program anyway. You had already picked that. But for the people that have been in the program of do everything the way your parents did, or please the others rather than yourself, and don't be selfish. Self-love, self-connection is selfish. I mean, there's so many aspects of all of this that's changing, I think, right now. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of destruction, a lot of discovery that systems, even systems of perspectives, like what it means to be a success.
Yes.
Right? So I think a lot of those, I don't know if all of them, a lot of them are either being destroyed, have been destroyed, are being challenged. So yes, and I think that's why why I'm seeing so many youth say no to almost everything. Because but what I love about that saying no to everything, and because I get a lot of questions around, I'm a trained theologian, and my spiritual formation is very sophisticated and very lifelong. And I do get a lot of questions around like things like atheism and the noners and the nunners and that. And I'm a big believer. I had a systematics professor in seminary, and he said there's a fine line between a mystic and an atheist. There's a fine line.
Oh, I love that.
Because oftentimes, if you have a deeper conversation with somebody who claims atheism, usually what they're doing is they're saying no to what something is not. So if you're sold an idea of God, that God can't be that, or you're unwilling to say God is that, you're saying no because it falls short. And if something falls short, then in some mysterious way, you're actually saying yes to something of your own being.
Mm-hmm.
Because to say no is to respond to something within you.
Right.
And you may not know what you're saying yes to, but you're responding to something. You're being true to yourself. So I think that the path of this, it is, we are called to a dynamic life, period. Nobody's life is mediocre. Nobody's life is ordinary. In fact, the tagline that my publisher suggested for my book is the extraordinary life in every moment. There are many, 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 many ways that we can unearth this for ourselves without giving up our lifestyles. And it's hinged on two things: perspectives and practices.
Mhm.
So I think it is operative for us. The agency is, where can I find opportunities to heal, change, and transform my perspectives that limit me, or to magnify and illuminate the perspectives that are life-giving within me? So
Mm.
there's a positive element, there's a reinforcing element, and there's a redirecting element. And what kinds of practices are alive for me? And give your assent into those. Now, with that, I think that I have found, because I've been now teaching and serving now for 23 years out in the world, I think there are some key elements. The first is having a consistent daily practice.
Mhm.
I teach meditation and contemplation, but there are many practices like that
Mhm.
that work the same end. Having a spiritual mentor or guide, or I'm trained in spiritual direction, but I don't like that word direct, because even in our training, we recognize that the relationship is a triangle, and you've got spirit, and you've got the person that's choosing the session for themselves, and you've got the person at service of the relationship.
Mhm.
So even though you're a spiritual director, you fade away in that role as you reflect on and help this relationship,
Mhm.
spirit and self. I think that's one of the most powerful ways that you can jumpstart and fast track your um, your call.
I agree. I agree because the other thing is another in loving service can help you see you better than you can see you a lot of times, because you're talking about the path to self-realization as God, as connected to God, or as God. And our self-talk in most cases is shame, blame. It's not a positive, illuminating self-talk in most cases. We almost have to learn to shut off that behind us. So do you find that as well, that that the self-talk has to be shifted as part of the practice? Or is it by focusing towards the divine or towards what you want, that other falls away?
So I think it's a bit of both.
Okay.
And it depends on where the person is in relation to these things. I'm a big banquet person, as you know.
Yeah.
It really translates into my spirituality. So my inclination is that the more we open up and experience our divinity, the other things begin to be healed. Scripture says, the Christian scripture says, it's love that casts out fear. So the more we experience ourselves as love, the more the fear is going to let down some of its defenses and be healed. However, in that process, as I work with people, because I work a lot of individual and a lot of groups, in that process, sometimes there is need, and that's with being a spiritual mentor, that's where the skillfulness is, to approach something directly. Sometimes the trauma in the cells and the heart and the mind and the energy bodies is such that it's calling attention.
Yeah.
And I think a great example of where we're seeing this is what a contributor Brene Brown is. I mean, she is speaking directly to these wounds, the
Yeah.
shame, the deep low self-worth, the guilt, how much it's a deep individual and collective wound. Our Western culture in particular is deeply wounded by this. So there are times and there are ways that we can approach these things. My online courses are really good with that. I have a course called Standing Strong in the Storm, and it is all about coming close to these limiting perspectives and anchored traumatic beliefs and ways of dissolving them. So there is a place for that. However, I would say that my my strength in my service is that, you know what, the more you get intoxicated with the beloved, these things start to become lighter.
Right, right.
They don't draw us so strongly. They don't influence us so strongly. And then it becomes easier to shift in relation to them. So I'm with that first and foremost. So that's why I think the daily practice can be such a fertile ground for that to happen.
Oh, I love that. I definitely agree that some sort of practice that's silence and connecting to source is source, God. I love that you call it the beloved. I love that. So,
Yes.
so I have a question, Kimberly, about global consciousness, because I know you're highly sensitive and you can feel the fear virus is still very strong right now. Do you have any suggestions for us on, because you're navigating in a courageous, fearless way through all of this? You're traveling, you're publishing books, I think you have a film coming up. I mean, you're going full steam no matter what the global consciousness is doing. But I would love the insights on how more people could do that. I know the daily practice will get you centered and validate your connection to who you really are. But is there anything else like I notice as an empath, I wear pyrite a lot to try to shield. I definitely did several shows this past weekend, and I had to really work on myself. So do you have a suggestion about that?
Sure. Yeah. And I love all of these tools, and I am so highly empathic. My learning of being an empath came when I was 20, and I hadn't realized through my years from 1 year old to 20 how absorbing, how penetrating. I had identified myself as being one in compassion, but I was discovering I was being my mind and heart and that were beginning to have thoughts that weren't my own. And deep, deep feelings that weren't even my own. So there are many, 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 many ways to work with this. Many. I have found for myself what has been the most powerful way is strengthening the capacity for the essential, I'll say, divine light that I am, strengthening it that it magnifies through my cells out into my subtle energy. And there are many tools with that. I teach a number of subtle energy techniques that work with that. So, for instance, there are great stories in Taoism. And I remember I was reading this one story, I think it's Fourth Uncle on the Mountain, I think. And it tells the story of this Taoist nun who, there were raging wars. I don't know what country it was in, but it was somewhere, I don't know, Indonesia or Vietnam or Korea, somewhere. I'm not sure, but somewhere over in that region of the world. And with these wars, she came out onto a cliff when aggressive military was coming in the direction of where she and her colleagues were. And she came out, her very presence ameliorated the aggression.
Wow.
It ameliorated and it dispersed it. And they did not move forward. Now, that's miraculous, right? And we're not all called to that level, but those are where most of my practices center is. That is within us. That's possible for everyone. And we can cultivate that integrity of presence so that the light that we are, what doesn't resonate with that does not come any closer.
Ah.
One tool I like that I got turned on to years ago is a harmonic shield put out by Mashur Anam.
I love him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love his holographic tools.
Mhm.
Those operate on that principle.
Mhm.
They
Yes.
reset the energetic signature so that we are more aligned with our divinity, and then it's less likely we are going to be resonating with the energy that's not our energy. Because when we're empathic, we begin resonating. My weak point was being compassionate. My
Right.
weak point were my collective conscious beliefs that to be compassionate is to go to the dregs. And
Well,
it's sort of like,
or yeah, well, what I was finding is someone had a lot of trauma they were processing, and I started out as a holding space, but then somehow there were triggers or hooks into my experience that started the trauma wheel going. So I was asked to do stuff after this event, and I was like, nope, I gotta go work on myself. I'm not gonna pretend it isn't there. I went straight and cleared it. But it's interesting because there's so many people that are their trauma wounds are showing up right now,
yeah.
and which is good. And actually that was a gift to me that I still had some little hooks to clear too. So yeah, I think everything's for you. It just may not feel good.
Right, right. And you brought up something that's a tricky navigation, because even as we grow in wholeness, even as we grow in that, we'll find at unexpected times it's like whoosh, because we're permeable as wholeness. When we're whole, we're vulnerable, we're undefended, because that's the greatest strength, that's the greatest freedom. So inevitably sometimes, things happen. Things happen. And I am colleagues with a lot of different spiritual leaders and teachers, and they are on the path of constantly growing and processing when projection happens, or um,
Yeah.
when parts of themselves, because they're open, are influenced. But I think one of the big stopping short that happens with this is that if we develop a culture that has a victim stance around empathy, we weaken ourselves. So yes, being permeable leaves us open, and a lot happens. A lot happens.
Mhm. Mhm.
But I know there was a movement, especially, gosh, about 15 years ago, 20 years ago, there was a lot of like, you know, um, having sessions done where you're cutting cords and you're dehooking and like that. And it's naming elements that happen, but it also did perpetuate a sense of a certain amount of victim, like, well, I'm an empath and therefore
Yeah.
I'm going to be hit by everything.
Right. Right.
And there is a co-creative element to being an empath. So the path of being so empathic gives us an opportunity to step into, what's my power here? What's my divine power here? And as we step into that responsibility with gentleness and compassion, we discover that we have beliefs, like my belief of being compassionate led me into dark places. Well, that was my belief. That was my belief that I was being of service. That was my unconscious orientation.
Yep.
As I healed that and have continued to heal that, those exchanges don't happen anymore. And my service, I can still remain very empathic, but my service remains a bit strong and free. So we have beliefs that set us up for some of these painful moments too.
Well, it kind of feels like it's a test. Like you say you do things or can do things, and then it's like, aha, well, let's test that out. So that's all. But I do think we're in a period now where the opportunity to expand. There's the teachings that you have that are online, the books that you've written, the courses you're going to be doing, other things coming up that allow people to get resonate with that beautiful love that you share, and remember who they are.
Yes. And I love that. You put it perfectly, right? Remember who we are. Remember who we are.
Yep. So you want to read a poem from your book, or if there was anything else, I don't know. You can take this any way you want. It's your platform here. But
You're awesome. Let me see what poem is.
And while she's looking this up, I really want to brag on Kimberly's cooking. What she asked when you go to the Christmas party was 2 savory things and 1 sweet. And so with the ingredients of everyone that's coming to the party, she's getting this information and then using it in the food. So cool. What gave you that idea to do that? That's
and I've been doing it for years.
Yeah.
I think it was just out of nowhere. I've always taken opportunities to cook for people.
I love it.
Having dinner parties in Florida before I moved here. And then I was like, well, how could I do it in a way that lets people be a part of it, that makes their heart happy? And asking people for part of my motive was that in the holidays, we overextend. Many people overextend. We make all these commitments, and then we have all these rituals and all these, and you're working till 2 a.m. to get something ready for that dinner and hosting here and that. And I wanted to create something where people could just come. And then secondarily, I wanted them to be able to have the experience of, like, maybe they love cardamom and no dinner party they go to has cardamom. And when they host their traditional people, maybe nobody likes that. Maybe everybody only likes the sweet potato casserole with all the brown sugar and that. We have these setups, and I thought, well, what if there's ingredients people love that they never get to experience?
Perfect.
And so it's kind of like it was me dreaming into what would make people I love happy, and then created it.
It's fantastic. Yeah. But I'm amazed that you can make it work.
I know. Last year was 108 unique ingredients and more than 50 dishes.
Oh my God.
That's it.
Wow.
And you know what makes me think of, Kathy, because I know you could sing this with all that you do in the world. It always reminds me of that commercial. I can bring home the bacon, fry it up in a pan.
See, that we both grew up in Ohio too, so we got that Midwestern thing. Oh,
it's
gosh.
True.
Yeah, but it's amazing, and the food's beautiful. It's not just that you can feel the love in it. So
yes, it's so much love, and it lets me do something that makes me happy too.
Yeah,
so
it's
win-win.
Okay, so back to
a poem, but this book, Miracles in the Naked Light. I know Kathy will put the link. You can find it on Amazon, and you can get it in print, ebook, or audio. And I know I have a little bit of a cold now, but my publisher had me record it in studio. So you get my voice, and at moments where there's chanting, you get the chants in it being chanted as we have done it. So that's cool. And Beloved Found, you probably want to go to my website for all of these things because they link through. But Beloved Found is some of my poetry. It's 95 pages of poetry, and it's some of it. And what's unique about this poetry book is it's the texture and experience of many different moments with the divine, within and without. So the poetry is not one step away from that intimacy. It is only that intimacy. So I think that you could find a home in those poems because they hit upon every human yearning, joy and sorrow, despair and longing, fulfillment, ecstasy, emptiness. They hit upon all of it. So there were 2 poems that drew me. And Kathy, I'm going to ask you to make the call. One is titled Canvas of the Eternal Heart,
Ooh.
and one is called Mary Breathes.
Ooh, Canvas of the Eternal Heart.
Okay, great. Wrap your fingers around the rim of your heart, pounding, pounding, pounding. It is the only way to feel the exultant throb that edges our toes to the cliff. It is the only way to jump, to exhale descent into the Kali mystery. Why keeps dripping down our chins, but the eternal heart is beating, 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 reminding you, me, us, friends, that we are too far gone. Freedom crests the curling waves below, steadily reaching its fingers to grab us and take us high, high, so high, into the erotic embrace of the one beauty.
Wow. Wow.
Thank you.
So our Auric Vibe said very nice. She loved that. And Joanne Palladino said, beautiful being. I feel much love woven in through her words.
Thank you.
And then there's other people. Felice said, yay, Kimberly and Kathy. There's a party going on there for sure. Yeah, and Bonnie said, hi, ladies. But yeah, that was beautiful. I'm so glad I picked that one.
Me too.
Yeah, yeah. So, Kimberly, what is your biggest wish for this audience as far as your connection with them, or a lot of these people are small business owners that are servant leaders, that they are very loving and care for their employees and their customers, but they may not always have the time and resources to find people like you to work with. What so they're not burned out because they're passionate about what they're doing, but they may not get to work on their self-love and self-expression. Do you have any suggestions for them during this time? Because it's a time of change. It's not going to slow down, I don't think.
Right, right. There is a great passage in the Hebrew scriptures. It's a story of Elijah. And as a scholastic and a mystic, we don't really know if Elijah lived, like if it was a physical person that lived. The council is out on that. But this individual, Elijah, is a perfect setup for our call as mystics, of servant leaders, channels for the divine. And towards the end of his life, he does these great miracles, and he ends up not having the impact that he had hoped with the Israelites experiencing God. And he gave his whole heart and his whole self. And he ends up being pursued by a queen that wants to kill him. And in that language, the God language, God comes to Elijah and says, go to the cave on Mount Carmel because I'm going to pass by.
Oh.
And Elijah goes to the cave and stays in the back of the cave. And I think if I would encourage us as servant leaders, let's stay in the back of the cave Let's move to the inner resources that are there within us. And let's be attentive and vigilant. Because as Elijah stayed at the back of the cave, an earthquake went by, and he was so aware and awake, he knew God wasn't in the earthquake. Stimulation on the outside. And a big fire went by, a column of fire, and Elijah knew that God wasn't in the fire. Knew it wasn't in the fire. Illusory desires, all the collective systems breaking down. And then a wind went by, and Elijah knew that in the dramatic wind that went by, God wasn't there. And then the scripture says, in the tiniest whisper of breezes, there was a voice that moved by. And Elijah heard. You are capable of hearing that voice. Elijah came to the face, then came to the opening and saw the divine. That whisper is going on all the time within you. And I would encourage you to care about drawing close to that whisper. And on the practical end, connect with me. What I have to offer, how I go about it, is always reasonably priced. And is always fittable and manageable within your big lifestyle that you've got.
Beautiful.
Let's draw close.
Yes. Well, that's what I know, that you are an advocate for the love that is here to be actualized and utilized. That we've been sort of in a cloud of not. It's just a cultural change where I a lot of times I call this, we're getting out of the dark ages and going to the Renaissance. And the Renaissance is where we all reconnect to who we really are, and the capacity to co-create with the universe and the divine is the way to change everything.
Yeah.
Right?
And I have no doubt that everyone's on this call knows this.
Yes.
Knows it in their unique path and way.
Yeah.
Yes. And we can really draw close to become a light-filled community even more around this, right? And there's strength in numbers.
Well, it's the numbers, but it's also the non-judgment of yourself or anyone else as you're watching, because we all, that term namaste, the oneness of the divinity in me sees the divinity in you and recognize it. If the more that we get to that, then it's playtime, because the divinity is like, oh, cool, you see it that way. Well, let's see how we can co-create something with that, right? Rather than the hierarchy and someone else decides for you and all of that, which, we have kind of a rebel side of us that doesn't work.
Right. Well, we can be rebels for pioneering new states of consciousness.
Right.
We're forming the new paradigm is how I look at it. We are the evolution. As one of the great SSE gatherings had this wonderful physicist from D.C. in once a couple years ago. And he proved to us scientifically how we're a scale expanding universe or cosmos, a scale expanding. That means we are part of the expansion.
Right.
So the more we give our yes, the more we do the descent into the Kali mystery, the more we do that, the more we are the fiber of the change.
Yes, it's perfect. The hope is that with all the technology changes and the capacity for us to be more connected in every way, that instead of it creating a division, it'll create a unification, because our human desires are all so similar, and we've only focused on how they're different, and that's changing. I think it's changing now, don't you?
I'm not good with those big statements.
Oh, okay.
I can give some big statements. My belief is consciousness will be all in all. It's inevitable that all form will eventually be the awakened consciousness.
Beautiful.
I can say that. I'm an optimist, so I see that all the destruction that's happening is the great potential for more awakening. I do see the same patterns of fear happening in even grander scales. So my counsel's kind of out, and I don't have the intuitive,
Uh-huh.
I haven't been given the intuitive insight like a prophet to say, in 2050, we are gonna, I just don't have that. But I do believe in the end, whatever this end is, that consciousness will come to the fulfillment as form, period. So yes, in that way, I do see it happening.
Yes. Well, I may have stumbled on my words saying that, but I definitely agree. I definitely agree that we're going to a renaissance where, to me, since I studied art history, that's a celebration. So, Kimberly, we're at the end. We'll have to do this again, which we will. We will. I love being with you. So, we want to make sure that you share the best way to get a hold of you.
Do you want
And
me to put it in comments
well,
or?
no, I already have. I put your website, but I wanted you to speak it for the people that are on radio, on podcast.
Wonderful. Yeah, that's the best way. And if you are a practitioner in that, I know Kathy and I are going to revisit it, but I have a big summit coming up that I've also formed to be an international networking opportunity to create new forms of collaboration. So take a look at that as well
Okay.
as an ancillary opportunity to be connected in the fiber of creation with the great things you're doing.
Great. So, and again, that's www.Kimberly Braun, and it's KimberlyBraun.com. So, I want to make sure everybody has access to you, and this is just the beginning. You guys, you'll be so glad you found Kimberly's work. So, thank you, dear. Thank you, dear. I'll see you soon. I'll see you
forward.
16th and the 17th, I think.
Huh? Yay! I'm looking forward.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. Signing off for now. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye, everyone.